So it's always a great day when new hardware arrives in the shop, and this one arrived just a couple days ago. This is the brand new Acer L2 24 watt edition, and it's still not shipping, but you can pre-order it now. And I will start this video by saying, look at it, it's gorgeous. And if you want to find out the rest, then stick around. Hey, it's Steve here, and welcome back. Now, I've reviewed two Acer lasers, the P20 and the V35, as well as their rotary attachments, and I've loved all of these. I've used them all extensively, and they all work. They do exactly what you would expect them to do, and kudos to Acer for building great lasers for a decent price. Now, they reached out a few weeks ago and said, hey, we've got this new laser, the Acer L2. It's a second generation laser from us. Would you like to have a look? So it arrived the other day and I put it together. Now, assembly was pretty much uneventful, although I did have two significant challenges that I had to work out. There's a shaft that links the two sides of the y-axis together. It's supposed to slide into a hole on the left side of the laser and then slide all the way across the front to a coupler on the right-hand side to the stepper motor. That didn't quite slide as easily as I think they intended. So I had to do a bit of loosening of side panels and things to get it to tighten up. Not a big deal, but it just wasn't, as was implied, the quick assembly. And the other challenge I had was the cable that runs into the laser module was a little short, and I ended up actually cutting some of the restraint tape and loosening off some of those cables. There's a big loop of cable on the top, but it goes into a restraint, and it seemed short after that. So when the laser module was at its lowest point, these cables were very, very tight. So I fixed that as well. Now, keep in mind, everything I say here is on a pre-production unit. I'm sure Acer, I've certainly shared this feedback with them, but I'm sure they're working on some of the assembly details as well as they go into production. So, not a big deal. So Acer advertises this as a second generation laser, and it is their second generation, but what does that really mean? Well, primarily two things. Better engineering, better aesthetics, as well as more features. Now, on the aesthetic side, you can see the laser just looks gorgeous. It's a really, really nice design from a visible perspective. We've come so far from those 2020 aluminum extrusions, and we've gotten to this, which is starting to look like a proper workshop tool rather than an experiment or an appliance. And that's really how you want any tool to look. So very nice there. But there's also some new features. The first of these is autofocus, and what they've done is put the entire laser module on a sliding rail, and it's powered, so when you hit autofocus from LightBurn, and you can do this directly from LightBurn, it will move the laser module down till it's just touching the surface, and then it will move it back up to the proper focus height. So really nice feature. Now, I did run into a challenge here, and I'll talk about that as we go. Next on the list here is the power display on the front of the laser. It looks a little gimmicky, but what it will show you is the actual output of the laser at a glance. So there's 10 red LEDs up the front of the laser, and that will tell you whether you're at 10% or 100%. Again, it's not necessary, but if you're just looking quickly at the laser, you can see how much power is being produced. So not a bad feature. There's also a crosshair now, finally, a laser crosshair. Again, it's going to take some getting used to because it doesn't work the way some of the others work. It's certainly very different than the X-Tool one. But at the end of the day, I know why they did what they did, and I actually kind of like it. It was a bit tedious to set up, though, and I'll talk about that as well. Another display, of course. Acer had displays on their first generation of lasers. What they've done here is the display is actually a much crisper display. The touch activity is much easier to work, and they've improved the software quite a bit. So the visible appeal of the software on the display, as well as just the intuitiveness of the operation, is much better. It comes with air assist, as well as all the standard safety features that you've come to expect in a laser. Certainly tilt sensor, flame detection, as well as a nice key so that you can disable a laser with a key. Good for safety if you've got kids in the house. So, really nice features all around. So the first thing we need to do here is connect the laser to LightBurn, and it's really nice here because this one actually detects the laser with the find my laser button. Most lasers I find struggle with that, and it'll go away here, and in a few seconds it'll pop up and say it found the laser, and that's the one we want. So let's add it, and we'll certainly call it an Atezr L2, and it has predetermined the size and where everything is. We of course have limit switches here, so we'll use auto home, and that's it. It's connected. Now, I mentioned that the crosshair was in a bit of a different place than most lasers, but we know still that it's going to be the lower left corner of the material because that's how we've configured the laser. And the way we're gonna set this is I took a piece of scrap material and I just put a tiny mark on it, and I'm gonna set that in the crosshair because we think that's where the lower left corner should be. And then in LightBurn I just created a little square where it thinks the crosshair actually is, and when you measure that, that'll give you the offset of the pointer from the actual laser, and you can see there it's about 49 millimeters. So the way I can set this now is I can go back into LightBurn and get to the device settings, and I'll enable that pointer offset, and I'll set the X to 49, and then I'll rerun the test, and you can see that the square is now much closer. Maybe we could tweak it a little bit more. You can also see the Y-axis there needs to probably go down a bit. And that's how you set it. And the beauty is, if you have multiple lasers, it will actually remember this setting for each individual laser. So good all around. And when you're done, then you know that the crosshair is always going to be in the lower left corner of where the material, where it thinks your image should start. Now, one last tweak I'm going to make to LightBurn here is I'm going to add a macro for autofocus. So a right click on the first macro button that's available, give it a name, obviously autofocus, and down in the next section here I can just type ESP500 in square brackets, and that's the command to the laser to turn on autofocus. And once that's done, if you click that autofocus macro, you'll hear your laser go and do an autofocus. So it's really that simple. Now, this is in the console tab, so if you don't have the console window enabled, you can go up to the window menu and you can enable console, and then it will appear in the tab down below here. Now, of course, we wouldn't be doing a review justice if we didn't look at some of the output. I always start with a cut test, and here's where I ran into the first problem, and it was related to autofocus. So I did an autofocus, and then I did a standard cut test, and you can see it there. Definitely cut out some squares, but if you look closely, you'll see the lines are quite thick, thicker than they should be. It's supposed to be 0.08 millimeter lines. So something wasn't right. So what I did was I used the standard fixed focus measuring stick that they provide, and I realized, hey, the autofocus isn't where it's supposed to be, and I used that focus stick and focused manually and did another cut test, and you can see the result. The lines are much finer. It cuts a lot more squares out of the sample, and in general, just performing better. So I got on an email with Acer and said, hey, like, what's going on here? How come the autofocus isn't positioning things in the right place? And I won't say that's resolved yet. I think it's just a software problem. I think they need to step up a few more millimeters, and that will solve the problem. What I did say to them, though, is I think for people who are a little bit neurotic about accuracy, like I am, I think they do need to be able to allow me to customize that value. So, you know, is it 8 millimeters? Is it 6 millimeters? Is it 6.5 millimeters for the focus height? I ran a whole bunch of tests, and I typically do on any laser. Even things like the previous Atezr, where they provide a little stick that flops down and supposedly provides focus. If I'm doing something accurate, I will always do a cut test, and a few cut tests actually, to make sure that things are working properly. But anyway, I did resolve the problem with a manual focus. It does kind of negate the autofocus until we get this problem resolved, but the laser cuts quite well. Next, I did an engraving test, and I always generally start with an attempt to do a grayscale rendering. For the most part, I'd say 95% of laser modules don't do grayscale at all, let alone poorly. So it's no surprise that the L2 struggled with this, and you can see the image there. It's very contrasty. There's no actual gray transition. So what I did was I then did a Stucky rendering, or you could use Jarvis as well to dither it. And you can see the photo came out amazingly well, and in fact it's really hard to tell it's dithered. So the good news is you can still do image engraving, and it isn't surprising that grayscale is a bit of a struggle. So engraving, top notch here. Now, as I was doing the testing for this review, I was also in the middle of a conversation with a viewer, Sarah, and she was trying to do colored engraving on stainless steel, in her case with an Xtool D1 Pro, and she was struggling, having problems. So I don't know if I've solved her problem yet, but what I thought was this was a good opportunity to actually do colored engraving on stainless with the Atezr L2. And I threw together a little test, and I didn't do a big range of results. You can see them here. I went from 10% power up to 70%, and the speed went from 70 millimeters per minute up to 140. Now you can see in the 10 to 20% range, there's just not enough power to mark the stainless at all, but it starts to kick in around 30%, and you can see the range there. It's pretty small, but you do get a color range from some sort of yellow to brown to blue, and it works okay. But I'll tell you what I told Sarah initially was colored engraving on stainless. Yes, lasers can do it. It's a bit of a side effect of diode lasers, but it's honestly really a gimmick. And if you go and ask manufacturers of lasers how you do this, they'll tell you, it's a good marketing point, but we don't actually support this with our laser. So message there is you can mark stainless, but don't assume you're going to get any kind of predictable results trying to do color. All right, so time to look at some things I think they did really well here and some things I think they need to work on. On the Pro side, definitely the aesthetics here are fantastic. It looks great, and I think they're definitely a leader heading, to where we're headed, which is much nicer products that look like real products as opposed to science experiments. Also, a really nice, rich set of features. Autofocus. There's resume on failure, which is kind of a mixed blessing because it only works in offline mode, but at least it's there. So if you're using a USB stick to move files and you have a power failure, you can basically continue where you left off. So all the usual safety features, of course. Now, a more subtle pro here is that this laser is quiet. It's been on the entire time I've been recording this video. It makes no noise at all when there's no reason to. So, if you're certainly engraving, it will turn on the pump, it will turn on the fan in the laser module, but other than that, it's generally silent. So kudos to them for thinking of our ears. Now, on the con side, there were definitely some things I think they need to work on. The most important one here, I think, is autofocus. Aside from the minor problem I'm having, which I think they will fix with software, autofocus, while it looks really cool and it's great on a marketing slide, it's actually really slow. So I think they need to find a way to make this faster. If they do, I think it'll be a great feature. The reason I'm complaining is because if you start an autofocus, it takes upwards of 30 seconds to do an autofocus, whereas if I'm doing a manual focus, they have a really nice knob on top of the Z-axis here. I can do a manual focus in 5 seconds. So, they have to think about that performance as well. And last on the list here, I think the assembly seemed a little more complicated than it should be. I was talking to a friend about this laser, and I said, I don't know what it is. There's nothing inherently wrong here, but as I'm putting this laser together, I find myself annoyed. And it's just because I think I ran into problems trying to get the connecting rod into the laser. I ran into a few other problems just just challenges. I mentioned the cables were a little shorter than they should have been. Again, I think they'll fix a lot of this stuff, but assembly should be easy, and it took me surprisingly long to put this laser together. Anyway, that's it. There's nothing major here, but I think, you know, this is the start of something really awesome, and I'm really happy that Acer's kind of leading the way here. All right, with that, I'll wind down. I'll put an affiliate link down below, so if you're interested in picking up an L2, please use that link. It will help out the channel. It is a surprising amount of work to create both a YouTube channel and each video. I spent 3 days basically doing this video, so keep that in mind. If you're interested in becoming a member and helping out the channel on a regular basis, click the join button down there. And I'll put a couple of videos up above. One of them will be the Acer V35 review I did a while ago. Go watch that, and you know, it'll give you an opportunity to compare the first generation lasers to what Acer's now selling, these L2s, and you can validate that this truly is a second generation laser. With that, I'll shut down, so get out there and make your world, and I'll see you next time.